He slapped her at my dining table. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed in a way silence never does. His mother clapped. Actually clapped. I didn't scream. I didn't lunge across the table. I didn't cry. I stood there, and I reached for my phone. That was the moment his life began to unravel. I've spent 32 years defending women who whispered their pain into court transcripts. I've sat beside trembling hands, bruised wrists hidden beneath silk sleeves, voices trained to apologize for surviving. I never imagined I would see that same look in my own daughter's eyes. But when Daniel raised his hand that night, he didn't just strike Lillian. He stepped into a courtroom he didn't know he was already standing in. And I was done pretending I was only his mother-in-law. My name is Margaret Caldwell. I build cases slowly, carefully, without noise. He thought it was just a slap. He didn't understand that some consequences begin quietly, and he never saw it coming. Before I take you back to that Sunday evening, may I ask you something small? If stories like this mean something to you, if you believe silence should never protect cruelty, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. And tell me where you're listening from. When I share these stories, I'm not just recounting events, I'm opening rooms I once locked. Your quiet support reminds me those rooms weren't opened in vain. Now let me take you back, because before the slap, there was peace. And peace can be very deceptive. Sunday dinners were my husband's tradition. Even after he passed, I kept them. Same oak table, same white linen cloth. I still iron it myself. Old habits don't retire. They anchor you. There's something steady about folding corners just right, about lining up silverware evenly, about pretending life is still symmetrical. I'm 59 now. 32 years in criminal defense. Most of my career, I stood beside women whose voices had been reduced to whispers. I've seen foundation layered carefully over bruises. I've heard apologies offered by the wrong person. I always told my clients the same thing. Documentation wins cases. Emotion wins nothing. I believed that. I still do. Lillian used to sit on the kitchen counter when she was little, swinging her legs while I cooked. She hummed when she was nervous. Soft, almost unnoticeable. She still does. When she told me she was marrying Daniel, I didn't interrogate her words. I watched her face. She said he was attentive, protective, strong. Protective. That word lingered longer than it should have. But mothers don't interrogate happiness. We try to trust it. Daniel was polished. The kind of man who speaks in complete sentences, maintains eye contact just long enough, brings expensive wine to impress, not to share. He complimented my career, called me formidable. Men like him always do. Judith, his mother, was quieter, observant, measuring. She once told me, over tea, a wife's job is to keep a man calm. I remember placing my cup down very gently. Porcelain makes a distinct sound when it meets wood. I've heard that sentence before, just not in my own kitchen. The signs were small. Small things are the most dangerous. Lillian stopped seeing her college friends as often. Said Daniel didn't like their influence. She changed jobs, closer to his office. He managed their finances. Called it efficiency. She laughed things off when I asked questions. "Mom, you're reading too much into it." Maybe I was. After 3 decades in courtrooms, you start seeing patterns everywhere. Control rarely arrives screaming. It arrives smiling. But I told myself something dangerous. She's happy, don't project. I wanted to be wrong. I needed to be wrong. The last peaceful Sunday before everything broke, sunlight came through the west window. Soft, golden, ordinary. Lillian stood beside me at the counter. She looked tired. Not bruised, not broken, just tired. "Are you sleeping?" I asked. She smiled too quickly. Of course. Daniel walked in right then. placed his hand on the small of her back, not gently, firm, possessive. I saw her shoulders stiffen, just slightly, but I saw it, and for a split second, I felt something old and familiar. The feeling you get before a witness changes their testimony. After dinner, Daniel stepped outside to take a call. Lillian helped me wash dishes. She kept glancing toward the door. I handed her a towel. "Are you safe?" I asked quietly. She paused. Just a pause. Then she nodded. "Too fast." I didn't press. Sometimes pushing too hard makes people retreat, but that pause stayed with me. I've built entire cases on pauses. The following Sunday was meant to honor my late husband, his birthday. I roasted his favorite chicken, set out the blue ceramic bowl he loved. I even placed his old watch at the end of the table, a private ritual, something to steady myself. Lillian arrived first. She hugged me longer than usual. Her hands were cold. Daniel and Judith came 20 minutes later. Daniel was already irritated. "Traffic," he said. Judith's smile was thinner than usual. Dinner began politely. Wine poured. Stories shared. Polite laughter. Then something small happened. Lillian forgot to warm the bread. That was it. Just bread. Daniel's tone shifted first. Subtle. Sharp. "You had one job." The table went quiet. Lillian apologized softly. Judith laughed. "A good wife anticipates." I folded my napkin carefully. There are moments when a room changes temperature. You feel it before anything happens. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes lowered. And in that moment, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I thought I understood violence. I just never expected it to wear my son-in-law's face. But that peace was about to end, and I didn't yet understand how loud silence could become. I didn't know it then, but that was the last calm Sunday we would ever have. The chicken had gone cold. No one touched their plates anymore. Daniel leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, fingers drumming once against the wood. "Why is this always so hard for you?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. That almost made it worse. Lillian swallowed. I said, "I'm sorry." Judith tilted her head slightly. "In my day," she said, sorry meant improvement. I folded my napkin slowly. Very slowly. There are moments when a room changes temperature. You feel it before anything happens. Daniel stood. He picked up the bread basket, held it in one hand like evidence. "This," he said, "is basic." Lillian reached for it. "I'll warm it." The slap came before she finished the sentence. Open hand. Quick. Precise. The sound cut through the room. For a second, no one breathed. Lillian didn't cry. She didn't scream. She blinked. That was all. Judith laughed. Not nervously, not awkwardly, openly. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's a lesson." I stood up, not abruptly, not theatrically, just deliberately. Daniel looked at me like I was overreacting. "She needs to learn respect," he said. Respect. I have heard that word in courtrooms more times than I can count. Usually right before sentencing, I walked to Lillian first. I didn't touch her face, didn't check for redness. I looked into her eyes. They were empty. That terrified me more than the slap. Daniel tried to justify himself. "It's not abuse," he said. "It's discipline. Discipline." His mother nodded. "You modern women," Judith added, "you confuse correction with cruelty." I could feel my pulse in my ears, but my voice stayed level. "You struck her," I said. Daniel scoffed. "It was nothing, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Lillian did next." She apologized. "I shouldn't have embarrassed you." She apologized to him, and in that moment, I saw it clearly. This hadn't started tonight. This was practiced, conditioned, built carefully over time. Control first, isolation next, correction last. I've outlined that pattern in opening statements for decades. Now it was sitting at my own table. I walked to the hallway, picked up my phone. Daniel followed. "You're not calling anyone," he said. I dialed anyway, calmly. "Domestic assault," I said when the dispatcher answered. "Yes, my address is." Daniel's voice rose then. "Are you insane?" "No." I was precise. Judith tried to intervene. "This is a family matter." "No," I replied. "It stopped being a family matter when you applauded it." Lillian stood frozen near the table. Small, still, I went back to her, placed my hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to explain anything," I whispered. She began shaking then, not dramatically, just small tremors beneath my palm. Police arrived within minutes. Blue lights flickered through my dining room window. Daniel changed tone immediately. Confusion, charm, minimization. Judith accused me of hysteria. But the officers had seen this before. They separated them, asked Lillian questions gently. She hesitated, and I said nothing. I didn't lead her, didn't prompt her. I let her speak. That mattered. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "He hit me." Daniel's face shifted then. Not guilt, fear, not of prison, of exposure. Handcuffs clicked. Judith protested loudly. "This will ruin him." I looked at her. He ruined himself. After they were taken away, the house felt hollow, like sound had been removed from it. Lillian sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I brought her water. She didn't drink it. "I didn't think you'd call," she whispered. I knelt in front of her. "I will always call," I said. That was the first time she cried. Not loudly, just quietly collapsing. And that's when I knew. This wasn't the first time. It was simply the first time someone intervened. Later that night, after she fell asleep in the guest room, I sat at my desk. I opened a new file. Not as her mother, as her attorney. Case title, State versus Daniel Harper. Beneath it, in smaller letters, Judith Harper contributing party. I didn't raise my voice that evening. I didn't threaten. I didn't rage. But something inside me went very, very still. And when I become still, I become dangerous. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. The first night after the arrest, the house felt unfamiliar. Too quiet, not peaceful, hollow. Lillian slept in the guest room, door slightly open, lamp still on. I stayed at my desk, legal pad in front of me, pen resting untouched. When violence enters your home, it rearranges the air. The calls started the next morning. Daniel's attorney first, measured voice, polite tone. He insists this was a misunderstanding. Of course he did. By noon, Judith had posted a public statement, long, carefully written, about false accusations, about career-driven women who destroy families. The phrasing was strategic, not emotional. Strategic. Friends began calling. Some were supportive, some were cautious. Caution feels like distance. Distance feels like doubt. By evening, a complaint had been filed against me with the state bar. Conflict of interest, professional misconduct, improper influence. It was structured, prepared. Someone had advised them well. I sat at the kitchen table reading the notice. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Lillian stood behind me. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "Yes," I replied. "They are." And they were succeeding. 2 days later, Lillian lost her job. Human Resources cited organizational restructuring. But the timing was exact. Daniel had contacts there. Influence spreads quietly. I watched her clear her desk. She wrapped her framed photo of us in tissue paper. Didn't cry, just said, "I should have seen it sooner." I didn't correct her. Self-blame is familiar terrain for survivors. I've testified about it countless times. Now I watched it sit across from me at dinner. The smear campaign widened. Emails sent to my firm. Anonymous complaints. Old cases flagged for review. Audits requested. I had done nothing wrong, but scrutiny is exhausting. That's the tactic. It isn't about proving guilt, it's about draining stamina. Lillian began deleting messages before I could see them. Threats, accusations, strangers questioning her character. One night, I found her sitting in the dark, phone in her lap, screen glowing. "I don't want to ruin your career," she whispered. I sat beside her. "You are not ruining anything," I said. "They are." She leaned her head against my shoulder, like she used to when she was 8. For a moment, I allowed myself to stop thinking like a lawyer. Just a mother. Just breathing. Daniel was released on bail. That changed the tone. Judith escalated. Civil lawsuit filed. Defamation. Emotional distress. Public humiliation. They accused me of fabricating charges to gain financial leverage. Projection is predictable. Control often accuses others of control. I began reviewing financial records, joint accounts, credit activity, transfers. Control leaves fingerprints. You only need patience to see them. Some nights I worked until 3 in the morning. Coffee cold beside me. Desk lamp the only light on. Lillian would wake and stand in the doorway. "Sleep," she'd say. "I will," I'd answer. But I didn't, because something in me knew this wasn't random retaliation. It was panic. And panic produces mistakes. The package arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Plain envelope, no return address, just my name. Inside a flash drive, no note. No explanation. I didn't plug it in immediately. Evidence requires caution. I had it scanned first. Cleared. When I finally pressed play, the room grew smaller. Judith's voice filled the speakers. Calm, organized. She described the smear campaign, named contacts, outlined strategy, laughed about my emotional vulnerability. Then her tone shifted. Her husband, the fall, the accident. "He wouldn't listen," she said. "So I made him." There was no tremor in her voice, no remorse, just irritation. I paused the recording, looked at Lillian. She looked back at me. And for the first time since that Sunday, I didn't see fear in her eyes. I saw clarity. That changes everything. If you're still listening, thank you. Stories like this remind me patience isn't weakness. It's quiet strength. The evidence was devastating. But devastation without timing is waste. Rushing would compromise everything, so I didn't rush. I organized, categorized, documented. Then I began to think, very carefully. Some wars are not fought with shouting, they are fought with endurance. And I wasn't finished listening. I didn't go to the police the next morning. That would have been emotional, and emotion makes mistakes. Instead, I made copies. 3 encrypted drives, 1 sealed envelope, 1 external backup placed in a safety deposit box. Documentation wins cases, emotion wins nothing. I listened to the recordings again. Slower this time. Judith's voice was steady, methodical. She spoke about the smear campaign like she was organizing a dinner party. Attack her credibility, she said. Question her stability. Her tone shifted when she mentioned her husband. The fool. He wouldn't listen, she said. So I made him. No panic, no regret, just annoyance. I have prosecuted violent offenders with more remorse. That detail mattered. Lillian sat across from me at the dining table. The same table. There was still a faint scratch in the wood from that night. Her fingers traced it absent-mindedly. "Is this enough?" she asked. "It's more than enough," I said. "But evidence alone doesn't win. Strategy does." I met with a colleague I trust, off record. No paper trail yet. I presented the audio, not as revenge, not as personal vengeance, as conspiracy. Witness intimidation, potential homicide. His expression changed halfway through the recording. "This is catastrophic," he said. "Yes," I replied. That's why we don't move yet. Timing. Daniel had violated bail conditions twice. Indirect contact. Messages through mutual acquaintances. Subtle, but documented. Each violation strengthened the case. Each misstep narrowed his defense. Panic leaves trails. One evening, I said the title out loud. My daughter's husband hit her. He didn't know her mother was a lawyer. Lillian didn't smile. She didn't seek revenge. She just nodded. Then let's finish it, she said. Her voice was steady. That was the moment I understood something. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. There's a difference. We coordinated quietly. District Attorney briefed. Internal Affairs notified regarding Judith's husband's death. Cold cases don't disappear. They wait. For mistakes. For witnesses. For recordings. I watched the machinery begin to turn. Slow. Deliberate. Daniel's attorney requested mediation. That told me everything. Judith escalated publicly. That told me even more. Arrogance accelerates collapse. One evening, Lillian asked to visit Daniel. I didn't stop her. Closure isn't assigned. It's claimed. She returned 2 hours later. Different. He said you ruined everything, she told me. I waited. I told him he ruined himself. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't break. That mattered more than any indictment. Forensic authentication confirmed it all. No edits, no manipulation. Clean chain of custody. Truth, when properly documented, is lethal. I prepared a supplemental filing, submitted evidence formally, quietly, no press, no spectacle. Justice often begins without headlines. New charges were added within days. Witness intimidation, conspiracy. Judicial review ordered in the reopened death investigation. Judith's attorney called 3 times that afternoon. I let it ring. Silence is leverage. Daniel's posture began to change in hearings. He entered confident. He began leaving uncertain. From arrogance to calculation to fear. It's subtle, but after 3 decades in courtrooms, I recognize it instantly. At home, Lillian began sleeping through the night. For the first time in months. She stopped apologizing for small things. Stopped checking her phone every few minutes. Stopped flinching when someone knocked at the door. She began applying for positions in another city. Another environment. And that's when I realized this was no longer about punishment. It was about interruption. Judith had built Daniel in an environment of control. Daniel attempted to rebuild Lillian the same way. But cycles only continue when someone stays quiet. We didn't. By the time the expanded indictment was filed, everything was aligned. Evidence, procedure, timing. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. They had no idea that silence can build walls stronger than words. Courtrooms have a particular stillness, not silence. Stillness, paper, wood polish, controlled breathing. I've stood in hundreds of them, usually beside the accused, sometimes for the state. That morning, I sat 1 row behind Lillian, not as lead counsel. I had formally recused myself, procedure clean, ethics intact, but I was present. Daniel entered first, suit pressed, tie centered, jaw tight in the way men hold it when control begins to slip. He didn't look at me. Judith followed, composed, chin lifted. Confidence clings longest to those who believe they're untouchable. Fluorescent lighting is not kind to that belief. The prosecutor began simply. Timeline established. Assault documented. Bail violations introduced. Then the recording. Judith's voice filled the courtroom. Clear, measured, cold. The temperature shifted. Not because she shouted, because she didn't. She outlined the smear strategy calmly, named contacts. Described how to question my emotional stability. Then the recording moved to her husband. The fall. The accident. She listened to herself confess. Her face remained still at first. Then it didn't. A flicker, small, but visible. Daniel turned toward her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Understanding arrived slowly, and it wasn't comforting. Lillian testified next. She walked to the stand without hesitation. Her voice was soft, but steady. She didn't dramatize, didn't embellish. She described the first time Daniel asked for her phone password, the first time he corrected her tone in public, the first time he told her which friends were bad influences. Control doesn't arrive violently, it accumulates. She described the slap, not theatrically, just fact. I felt small, she said. There was no tremor in her voice. That sentence landed heavier than shouting ever could. Daniel took the stand against his attorney's advice. That was his final error. He began with justification, then pivoted to blame, then confusion. When confronted with the bail violations, his answers shortened. When confronted with the recording, his composure fractured. "I didn't know," he said. Maybe he didn't. But ignorance does not excuse participation. Judith's testimony was sharper. She attempted reframing. Context. Tone. Selective interpretation. Until the forensic analyst explained authentication. Metadata. Chain of custody. Voice pattern confirmation. The science removed ambiguity. Her control slipped. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough for the judge to see it, enough for the jury to understand. When the verdict was read, it was not loud. Domestic assault, coercive control, witness intimidation, guilty. Additional investigation ordered in the reopened death inquiry. Judith taken into custody, pending formal charges. Daniel did not look at Lillian when the cuffs clicked. He stared straight ahead, as if forward motion could undo backward damage. It cannot. Afterward, there was no applause, no celebration, just air returning to lungs. Lillian stood beside me in the hallway. Reporters lingered outside. We did not stop. "Is it over?" she asked. "For him," I said. "For you, it's beginning." She exhaled slowly. That breath was the loudest sound of the day. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, cleaner. Judith had taught her son that control was power. He learned too late that accountability is stronger. I didn't shout, I didn't threaten, I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The system did what it was built to do. And in that silence, I finally felt free. Sometimes the loudest moment in life is the one where you say nothing at all. The house is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet. Not the kind that hides things, the kind that lets you breathe fully. Morning light comes through the west window now, soft, uninterrupted. I still iron the linen tablecloth on Sundays. I still set 4 plates out of habit. Then I pause. And remove too. Grief doesn't disappear, it rearranges itself. Lillian moved 3 months after the verdict. New city, new office. Small apartment with wide windows and no locked drawers. The first night she slept there, she called me. "Mom," she said. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't respond immediately. I just listened to her breathing. That was her victory. Not the courtroom, not the sentencing. The quiet inside her chest. Daniel began serving his sentence. Judith's reopened case moved forward separately. Cold cases take time, but truth is patient. It waits. I did not celebrate either outcome. Justice is not champagne, it's maintenance. It's knowing the door locks now. It's knowing someone cannot enter your life without consequence. People have asked me if I regret it, if I regret making that call, if I regret turning family into litigation. I don't, because that night was not about punishment, it was about interruption. Cycles survive on silence. My daughter's husband hit her he didn't know her mother was a lawyer. That sentence is not a boast, it's a reminder. Love sometimes requires confrontation. Protection sometimes requires exposure, and dignity sometimes requires distance. I nearly lost my career. I endured audits, whispers in hallways, old colleagues avoiding eye contact. But I never lost clarity, and clarity is worth more than comfort. Lillian laughs again now. Not the careful laugh she learned in that marriage, a full one, unfiltered. She doesn't apologize for forgetting bread. She doesn't shrink when someone raises their voice. She doesn't look down. That is what justice gave her, not revenge. Freedom. If there is a lesson here, it isn't retaliation, it's vigilance. Control rarely begins with violence. It begins with permission. Small permissions, ignored instincts, polite silence. Break it early, break it firmly. Break it without shame. Justice is not loud, it is not fast. Sometimes it is simply being able to sleep without waiting for footsteps in the hallway. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed, but only if someone refuses to stay quiet when it matters most, and I will never regret refusing. Would you have made the same call if it were your child? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe patience can be powerful, stay with me for the next story.